Sophisticated. Thought-provoking. Entertaining. Look who's talking in the city. Look who's talking in the city. Look who's talking in the city.
Coming from the campus of the Southern University in Baton Rouge. Hi, I'm Rae'Ven Jones, and you're tuned in to Look Who's Talking in the City. Hello, and welcome to Look Who's Talking in the City. I'm your host, Rae'Ven Jones. According to the Census Bureau, there are 7 billion people in the world. But have you ever wondered where we all come from? Our origins, our beginnings, our genesis, our roots. Why we look so different? Why some people have blonde hair and blue eyes and others may have dark skin and dark color eyes. My guest today has just completed a groundbreaking documentary entitled The Myth of Race and the Evolution of Skin Color that answers all of those questions. He's also having a public screening of this documentary here on the campus of Southern University on March 16th that's open to the public. Please welcome my guest, Dr. Okoye Ahmose. So tell us, how did you come up with the idea to make the documentary?
Yeah, well, first of all, Rae'Ven, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a special guest on your show. The spur or the catalyst behind this documentary actually stems from my doctoral dissertation, which stems from race. I was working on my PhD at the University of Southern Mississippi, located in Hattiesburg, and my doctoral dissertation once again dealt with race, in particular, how stereotypes are created. Now, there was one thing I noticed when I finished my PhD and my dissertation, and that one thing that I noticed is something is missing out of this picture. Something just was not adding up. And what I found out, Rae'Ven, the thing that wasn't adding up is, what is race? Why do we place so much emphasis on race? Why is race such a fascinating topic? And what I did, what I set out to do is examine the word race, in particular, etymology. That word etymology means the study of the origin of the word. So when I looked at the etymological origins of the word race, I found out that it actually stems 5 centuries ago, from way back from the Spanish Inquisition that happened around 1619. And so with race, what happened was we had a group of people that basically saw other people who looked different from them, and they just placed them in different categories. And they said, you're black, or you're white, you're Asian, or you're this, or you're that. But what the proponents of that concept didn't realize, Rae'Ven, is that there are so many people in the world who looked entirely different that it's impossible to put those many people in just a handful of groups. And so once again, I looked at the origins of the term race and found out that it was very, very nebulous. It was very, very cloudy or hazy. And then I went into great detail to define how that term came into play and how it was implemented into the mindset that we have today.
Where did the term race come from?
So when we talk about that term race, we found out that term stems centuries ago, actually from a person by the name of Johannes Friedrich Blumenbach. And what Blumenbach contended is that all humans stem from 5 different races. He said the Ethiopian race, the Caucasian race, the red race, the Malaysian race. So he named these races and said that all humans come from them. But once again, it's a myth because in biological terms, we know that we're 99.9% the same. And that's one of the things that my documentary talks about.
So you say the term race is a myth. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, again, we place people in racial categories simply because we look different. But we know that race is a myth because from a biological standpoint, biology teaches us why we look different. And the reason why we look different is because there's a biological process that happens every generation when a man's sperm fertilizes the female of a woman's egg. So what happens in that process is that offspring that's developing in that woman's womb, that fetus is copying 50% of their genes from their mother and 50% of their genes from their father. But sometimes, Rae'Ven, that offspring is not copying those genes correctly, which is called a mutation. Now, a mutation is not a bad thing. Actually, it's a good thing, because without that small mutation occurring in every generation, we would all look the same. Now, how boring would that be? So it's that small mutation that happens every generation that generates why we look different, our nose size, our lips, why some people may have coarse hair, why some people may have straight hair, some people may have wide noses, thick lips or whatnot, some people may have thin noses and thin lips. So it's that small mutation which negates race, because race is just a term, once again, that man made up, but it's the biological differences that happen in every generation which negates the term race, which bases everything strictly on science, in particular human genetics.
So can you tell us some of the places that you have traveled to come up with the information for this documentary?
Yes. The first place I traveled to, Rae'Ven, was Africa, in particular East Africa in the Ethiopia Great Lakes area. Now, what's so significant about that area is when anthropologists discovered the oldest fossil remains of humans, they actually dated them and found that those remains were the oldest in a place called Ethiopia. Now, not only in Ethiopia, but that whole Great Lakes region. So I went to Ethiopia first because I wanted to retrace the footsteps of our origins, Homo sapiens, our ancestors. So I went to Africa first, and then I went to India. Now, the significance of India is people don't understand that our ancestors went east when they first left Africa. They went to places like present-day Iraq, present-day Turkey, present-day Pakistan, and India was also one of the first places they went as well. So I had to retrace the whole footsteps. So I started in Africa, went to India, and then I wound up going back to Europe, in Frankfurt, Germany, to do some research there as well.
Okay, great. So can you explain to us what the documentary is about?
Well, I can summarize this documentary, what it's about, in three different elements. The first element, again, is the anthropological origins of our species, Homo sapiens, and how everyone, I don't care who you are, everyone, all 7 billion people on this earth, whether you claim to be white, whether you claim to be black, Asian, Hispanic, Indian, whatever race or nationality you claim to be, your DNA can be traced back to East Africa, in particular a very, very, very small population that lived in that Ethiopia area. So that's the first part of my documentary, entails that our origins of Homo sapiens originated in Africa, and then, as I stated earlier, the migration pattern that our ancestors took to populate the world. The second part entails the biological process, which I spoke of earlier, explaining in great detail that biological process, whereas once again, that fetus that's inside of a woman's womb, when that fetus is copying the genes from their mother and the genes from their father, sometimes the genes aren't copied correctly, and then that's what causes the mutation, that's what causes us to look different. So this explains why you could look exactly like your mother and you can walk like your father. Or you could have your mother's eyes and your father's nose. Or you may not look like either one of them. And then the third part of the documentary, Rae'Ven, it involves the evolution of skin color, in which I'm challenging a prevailing theory that some anthropologists / paleontologists have asserted over the years, is that we have different skin color due to the proximity of the sun. So they say that our ancestors had dark skin because they moved to warmer environments closer to the equator. And then that caused their skin to get darker. And then people who moved away from the equator, their skin turned lighter. So I'm challenging that theory simply because it doesn't make sense. Now, the reason why I say it doesn't make sense is if everyone who lives along the equator, if that theory is true, then everyone who lives along the equator should have the same color skin. In other words, if the sun causes our skin to be darker, how do you explain people, light-skinned people in a place such as South Africa, where it's extremely hot, and South Africa is sitting right there on the equator? How do you explain those people's skin not turning darker? And so, again, it doesn't make sense from a biological standpoint. So I'm challenging that theory as well.
Okay, so can you tell us about some of the scholars you have interviewed for this process?
Exactly. The first scholar I interviewed is a great scholar. He's an anthropologist. His name is Dr. Johannes Haile Selassie. He's a curator at the National Museum at Cleveland State University. The second scholar that I interviewed is a great scholar, a historian. Just this man's scholarship and erudition is just impeccable, and he teaches right here at Southern University. His name is Terrell Johnson. So I want to send a great shout out to Professor Terrell Johnson at the Southern University History Department. He helped me out tremendously. And last, Dr. Jeffrey Long at the University of New Mexico, who is a human geneticist, who helped me understand the biological process that I explained earlier. So I have 3 great scholars along with 2 other dermatologists who came together, and we all collaborated on this project, and it's a great project, and I'm so happy I had the opportunity to work with those people.
Great, it's awesome. So can you tell us, how do we all know for sure that humans can be traced back from Africa?
Now that's a great question, Rae'Ven. The reason why we know that all humans can be traced back to Africa is, first of all, understanding what a species is. A species is defined as a fertile group that can produce offspring, and that offspring will also be fertile. And if that offspring is fertile and can produce another offspring that will also be fertile, that means that you are the same species. So we know that we're the same species. Again, if you claim to be white, black, Asian, Hispanic, whatnot, we're the same species. Now, the reason why we know that we can all be traced back to Africa is because when you look at from the female side, we look at what's called the mitochondrial DNA. Now, mitochondrial DNA can be passed down from mother to her children, but only the daughter can pass down that particular gene to the next generation. So it's through the mitochondrial DNA that all females can be traced back to a woman who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Now, on the male side, it's different. On the male side, it's called the Y chromosome. Now, the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son. It's a very, very, very important marker in which we can trace all male lineage. Every male on this planet, no matter who you are. Once again, if you claim to be white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or whatnot, all males through the Y chromosome can be traced back to a common male ancestor who lived in Africa thousands of years ago as well. So this is how we know that all humans can be traced back to Africa. Once again, through the female lineage, it's called the mitochondrial DNA, and through the male lineage, it's called the Y chromosome.
Okay, so can you answer this question?
Yes.
Why do you think all human beings look different?
You asked some great questions. Now, why do humans look different? We look different because there's a biological process that happens every time a male sperm fertilizes the female egg. So when that happens and that child is being conceived in the female's womb, a small mutation is occurring. Let me explain that real quickly. So when the child is inside the female's womb, that child is copying 50% of their genes from their mother and 50% of their genes from their father. So again, sometimes those genes aren't copied correctly, thus causing a mutation. Now, a mutation, as I stated earlier, is not a bad thing. Mutations are actually a good thing, because without mutations, Rae'Ven, we would all look the same. Now, how boring would that be? So it's the small mutations that happen every generation that causes us to look different. There's a small mutation in the nose size. There's a small mutation in our lip size. There's a small mutation in our hair texture. This is why some people, again, have different nose sizes. This is why some people have different lip sizes, why some people have extremely dark skin, jet black skin, and straight hair, thin noses and thin lips. Some people may have jet black skin with coarse or kinky hair, wide noses, and thick lips. And so this is why some people may have blonde hair. This is why some people may have blue eyes. All of these things are mutations that occurred thousands of years ago. They've been well documented through science, and this is why we look different. It's the small mutations, again, that occur in every generation, and the more time elapses, the more time goes by, you can predict that later population is going to look much, much different from the original population. The human body is truly amazing. Mm-hmm. It really is.
So what do you mean when you say Africa has the oldest genetic variation in the world?
Well, what we mean when we say Africa has the oldest genetic variation in the world, what we mean, again, our species, Homo sapiens, is 200,000 years old. So what that means is the gene flow has been going on longer in Africa than any other place in the world. This is why if you ever get a chance to go to Africa, you'll find that Africa has the oldest genetic variants in the world. In other words, you will never ever go to a place where you see so many people who look entirely different. We know in the West, we have stereotypical images of what Africans look like, extremely dark skin, wide noses, thick lips, coarse or kinky hair. But again, those are stereotypical images. In other words, if you haven't ever traveled outside of the United States and gone to Africa, you'll think that all Africans look the same. But if you travel in particular to East Africa, you start seeing Africans who look totally different from those stereotypical images. You start seeing people again with jet black skin that is so black, but their hair is extremely fine. Their hair is extremely straight. You start seeing people like that in Ethiopia, some parts of Kenya, some parts of Somalia. But again, those are the people who made that first migration out of Africa, and they went east to places such as India. So you can see that link, that direct link between India and Africa, in particular East Africa, because India represents one of the first populations who made the migration out of Ethiopia, and India is one of the first places that they settled. So a lot of people get offended, especially people who I talk to from that area in India or from India. When you make that connection with Africa, sometimes they may get offended and say, "Oh no, we have absolutely nothing to do with Africa. Or we're not African." No. First of all, everyone, I don't care who you are, your genes can be traced back to Africa. And one of the things I always tell people from India when they say that they have no connection or no affinity with Africa, I just tell them, hey, now, you're African, but your genes were just given to you from someone who lived in India. Because once again, we talk about the etymological origins of the word India. That's not even the original term for that land. That land was first called a place called Sindhu, which we can the etymological origins stem from that Sanskrit word, which is once again, it was called Sindhu, and then it went from Sindhu to Hindu, then from Hindu to Indus, and then from Indus to India. The Greeks came in and they started calling it India. So again, it all originated from that one river that we call the Indus River now, but that river was first known as the Sindhu River. So this is what we mean when we say Africa has the largest genetic variation in the world. Again, it's the gene flow. The older the population, the more you're going to see differences. The more people are going to look different. Now, the younger the population, such as the European population, this is why a lot of times you see people who look maybe not the same, but you don't see the differences that you see in Africa. For example, it's estimated that the European population is 30,000 years old. So again, if a generation is 20 years, then that's only 1,500 years of genes changing. So this means that the population is going to look more of the same.
Can you tell us what is a founders group?
Exactly. Now, when we talk about a founders group, once again, if we go back and we talk about the small population that was in Africa. So imagine that all humans were in Africa, no place else. They were just in Africa. Our ancestors didn't start to migrate. We were all in Africa. It was a small population, and no one lived any other place in the world. Now, out of that population, Rae'Ven, the entire population didn't move. Only a small subset of that population moved. So that small population, for example, who went to India, that would be considered a founders group. So all you need is two people who left Africa with extremely dark skin, straight hair, thin noses, and thin lips, go to a place where no one else was living, such as India, and they just start having babies. So those babies start intermingling with the offspring. And so this is how you can have a population that looks similar. A very, very small population left out of Africa, and they just went to a place where no one else was living at, and they just start having babies. And this is what's known as a founder group. Yeah.
So what is genetic isolation?
Okay, another great question. Now, when we talk about genetic isolation, that works hand in hand with a founder group. So when I talk about that founder group who came to an uninhabited place where no one else was living, they started having babies, having babies, having babies, meaning that no one else from other places that looked different came in and mixed with them. So this is what we mean by genetic isolation. They moved to that place, started having babies, but people from the outside didn't come in that looked different to intermix with them. Mm-hmm. That same population just stayed there and they just kept the gene flow going. Mm-hmm. This is why if you go to places such as Scandinavian countries such as Norway, Sweden, or Finland, you'll see so many people with blonde hair and blue eyes, mm-hmm. and they're extremely tall. They could be 6'5", 6'7", 6'9", and they're real slim. This is a great example of genetic isolation because that gene flow, they settled there and no one that looked different from them came into that area and intermixed with them. Mm-hmm. So those same genes, 6'5", 6'7", blonde hair and blue eyes just kept repopulating. And that's why when you go there today, you see that same dominant gene flow being disseminated today.
So why do we have different skin colors and where does that come from?
Exactly. So again, that goes back to a theory that I'm challenging in my documentary, whereas we have so many scholars at these big universities that say that our skin color evolves from our proximity to the sun. Again, they say that we're dark because we move closer to the sun and the sun made our skin darker, whereas our body had to produce more melanin, and melanin is the substance that makes our skin darker. And on the flip side, the further away from the equator, they said that our bodies did not need the production of melanin, mm-hmm. therefore making our skin lighter. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm challenging that and asserting another hypothesis that deals with mutations. Mm-hmm. Because again, if the sun makes our skin darker, the closer you live to it, or lighter, the further you wait, the further away that you live from it, mm-hmm. then how do you explain people with blonde hair and blue eyes? Okay, so did the sun change their eye color as well? Did the sun change their hair color? How do you explain people with red hair? Mm-hmm. See, how do you explain people who live, Eskimos, mm-hmm. who live in real cold climate, but their skin is our color, right. brown. So how do you explain that? No, once again, I'm challenging that theory and asserting an hypothesis that says the evolution of skin color deals with a genetic mutation. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I thank you for allowing me to come on your show, but I can't reveal it because then you may not want to come to the screening.
Right.
So,
right.
So I can't release it, but all I'm saying is I'm challenging a prevailing theory that's been around for a long time, right. and I'm asserting a new hypothesis that deals with the mutation process that I explained earlier.
All right. So the trailer you produced for this documentary is truly amazing. Mm-hmm. So how about we just take a break and let the audience check it out for themselves.
Right. Sounds good. Let's do that.
I had one founder group leave Africa and form the Eurasian population. And then the founder group that formed the Americas left Eurasia to form the Americas. So they had a subset of what was in Eurasia, which was a subset of what was in Africa.
If you want to trace down the genes, you're going to eventually narrow down to Africa.
We know that we all shared a common ancestor that lived in Africa between 200 and 150,000 years before today.
Did you know that the term race is a misnomer and that the term was coined to implement a classification system based on physical characteristics such as skin color, eye color, hair texture, and other phenotypical features?
Modern humans originated in Africa.
So these populations of Homo sapiens that came from Africa at some point start to radiate, and then they move across towards the southeastern part of Asia, across the Indian Ocean, so through probably Afghanistan, Pakistan, India.
The grandchildren can't be older than the grandparent. Africa is the grandparent. The 5 and blooming bogs theory are the grandchildren.
There is only one lineage that eventually gave rise to anatomic model Homo sapiens.
We asked the question, well, can we find some marker that is common in Europeans and not seen in people Asians or Africans or something. We couldn't find one.
How we define a species is two individuals being able to reproduce and have a fertile offspring.
All races and all colors of people on Earth have the same relative number of melanocytes. Those are the amounts of pigment-producing cells in the skin. Everyone has the same amount.
My ancestors obviously at some point lost most of their melanin or skin pigment.
The biggest mistake that any individual could make would be to assume that all Africans look the same. Genetic variance explains to us that the older the population, the more differences you will encounter.
Genetically, we're all the same.
So can you tell us or tell the audience how can they purchase the DVD?
Yes, you can purchase the DVD by logging on to www.maat, Maat is spelled M-A-A-T, films, Films.com. Again, that's www.maatfilms.com.
So can you tell us one more time when the screening will be?
Yes, the screening is going to be Wednesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. at the Cotillion Ballroom on the campus of Southern University. Once again, that's going to be Wednesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. on the campus of Southern University in the Cotillion Ballroom. Also, I would like to invite the entire Baton Rouge population to come out and see this documentary. Once again, the purpose of this documentary is to give people an alternative way to view race, and that is understanding the biological process which causes us to look different. Because if you understand why we look different, then you look at race in a totally different concept, and hopefully this can be taught in our school systems as well.
Great, great. So I just want to say that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this screening, and I really, really want to thank you, and I appreciate you for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rae'Ven.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. I would also like to thank my special guest, Dr. Okoye Ahmose. Don't forget the screenings on Wednesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. at the Cotillion Ballroom at Southern University. For more information, please visit Facebook at The Myth of Race and the Evolution of Skin Color. You can also contact me at Instagram, Facebook, or email. For more videos, please visit my YouTube page, and as always, keep faith and keep God first, and we'll see you next time on Look Who's Talking in the City.
The preceding program was brought to you by the Southern University Mass Communication Department.